She uncovered the billionaire CEO's corruption and protected their son from scandal. "I found the accounts," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. "Cayman Islands, Singapore, the shell corporations, all of it." Dominic looked up from his tablet, expression unreadable in the dim light of his study. "What accounts?" "Don't." The word cut through the air between them. "Don't insult me with corporate doublespeak. You've embezzled millions. You've committed fraud. You've risked everything we built, everything that belongs to our son." Dominic stood, his imposing frame casting shadows across the room. "I did what was necessary. For us. For Elijah's future." "His future?" Incredulity sharpened her words. "You've put his inheritance at risk. Worse, you've risked his faith in you and everything you taught him about integrity and hard work." He moved toward her, reaching for her hands. She stepped back. "If you report this, you'll destroy Elijah," he said, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Think about what the media will do to him, the son of a disgraced CEO. Think about his college applications, his future. Is your moral high ground worth sacrificing our son's happiness? Have you ever discovered a secret so devastating it forced you to choose between truth and protecting someone you love? What would you do if the person you built your life with betrayed everything you thought they stood for? If you've ever faced an impossible choice between loyalty and integrity, you'll want to stay until the end of this story. Hit subscribe now and join me, Mr. Sterling, as I reveal how one woman's courage changed everything. Olivia Reed stared at the email attachment, her heart hammering against her ribs. The financial records displayed on her screen weren't just irregular, they were damning. After 3 years as chief financial officer at Meridian Technologies, she had stumbled upon evidence that would destroy everything. Offshore accounts, falsified reports, and millions in diverted funds. But it wasn't just the company at stake, it was her family. The mastermind behind the fraud was none other than Dominic Reed, her husband of 20 years, father of their teenage son, and the celebrated CEO whose rags to riches story had inspired countless entrepreneurs across the country. Olivia closed her laptop with trembling hands. The penthouse was silent, save for the distant hum of Manhattan traffic 40 floors below. She moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The city lights blurred through unshed tears, as memories flooded back their humble beginnings in a cramped apartment. The late nights building Meridian from nothing. The pride in Dominic's eyes when their son was born. When had it all changed? When had ambition corrupted the man she loved? 22 years earlier, Olivia Martinez had been a brilliant accounting student at NYU, working nights at a local coffee shop to cover expenses her scholarship didn't. That's where she first met Dominic Reed, a charismatic business student with big dreams and empty pockets. "The usual?" she'd asked, already reaching for the large black coffee he ordered every morning. "Actually," he'd said with a smile that transformed his serious face, "I think I'll try something new today." That something new became their ritual, Dominic trying a different coffee each morning, Olivia suggesting combinations not on the menu. Within weeks, he was staying until her shift ended, sharing his vision for a technology company that would revolutionize how businesses managed their data. "Everyone's focused on consumer applications," he explained one night, sketching diagrams on coffee-stained napkins. "But the real opportunity is enterprise solutions. Businesses are drowning in information without the tools to make it useful." Olivia found herself captivated not just by his ideas, but by his determination. Unlike other students with entrepreneurial dreams, Dominic had concrete plans, market research, and a remarkable ability to explain complex concepts in accessible terms. "You should be my financial officer when I start this company," he'd said, half joking. "Maybe I will," she'd replied, not joking at all. They married a year after graduation, pooling their meager savings to rent a small apartment in Brooklyn and a tiny office space in Manhattan. Meridian Technologies began with 3 employees, Dominic as CEO, Olivia handling finances, and Marcus Winters, Dominic's college roommate and a promising young lawyer, managing legal affairs. Those early years were lean but exhilarating. 18-hour workdays blended into weekends. They lived on ramen noodles and ambition, celebrating small victories like their first client, their first positive cash flow month, their first employee hire. "We're going to make it," Dominic would whisper at night, holding Olivia close in their cramped bedroom. "Everything we've dreamed of, it's happening." And it did happen. Meridian secured a major contract with a Fortune 500 company in their third year. By year 5, they had 50 employees and moved to larger offices. Year 7 brought their first acquisition of a smaller competitor. Year 10 saw Meridian go public, the IPO exceeding all expectations. Through it all, Olivia and Dominic remained a team at work and at home. When Elijah was born in year 6, they converted a corner of their office into a nursery, taking turns with feedings and diaper changes between meetings. "He'll grow up understanding the value of hard work," Dominic said, cradling their newborn son while reviewing quarterly projections. "He'll know nothing worth having comes easily." As Meridian grew, so did their lifestyle. The Brooklyn apartment became a Manhattan condo, then the penthouse. Dominic's off-the-rack suits were replaced by bespoke Italian designs. Vacations evolved from weekend drives to the Hamptons to summers in the south of France. Yet through the external changes, Olivia believed their core values remained constant. Dominic still worked harder than anyone at the company. He still treated employees with respect, remembered their children's names, attended their weddings and funerals. He still came home excited about innovations rather than stock prices. Or so she thought. The sound of keys in the door jolted her back to reality. She quickly wiped her eyes and turned to face her husband. "Working late again?" Dominic asked, loosening his tie as he crossed the marble foyer. His smile, once her anchor, now seemed hollow, a practiced performance for investors and board members. "Just reviewing some quarterly reports," she replied, the lie bitter on her tongue. He kissed her cheek, his cologne expensive and unfamiliar. "Don't work too hard. We have the charity gala tomorrow." Olivia nodded, watching as he disappeared into his study. The distance between them stretched like an abyss, one she hadn't fully recognized until today. In their bedroom, she opened her laptop again, staring at the evidence. She had 3 choices: confront Dominic, report him to the board and authorities, or find a way to protect what mattered most, their son, Elijah. At 17, Elijah was brilliant, sensitive, and utterly devoted to his father. Learning that his hero was a fraud would devastate him. And if the scandal broke publicly, the media would tear their family apart, exposing Elijah to scrutiny and shame he didn't deserve. Elijah Reed had inherited his father's analytical mind and his mother's compassion. A senior at Westfield Academy, he excelled in mathematics and debate, captained the robotics team, and still found time to volunteer teaching coding to underprivileged middle schoolers. "You don't have to do everything, you know," Olivia had told him just last week, finding him awake at midnight working on college applications. "Dad says excellence isn't optional," Elijah had replied, rubbing tired eyes. "Besides, Stanford doesn't accept pretty good." Stanford, Dominic's alma mater, and Elijah's dream school. Father and son had visited the campus together last spring, Dominic pointing out his old dormitory, the library where he'd studied until dawn, the bench where he'd decided to start Meridian. "This could be you in a few months," Dominic had told Elijah, slinging an arm around his shoulders. "The next generation of Reed innovation." Elijah had beamed with pride, the weight of expectation sitting comfortably on his young shoulders. He didn't just admire his father, he wanted to be him, follow his path, continue his legacy. How would he react learning that legacy was built on fraud? Olivia closed the laptop again. Decision made. She would confront Dominic privately, demand explanations, and find a way to shield their son from the fallout, whatever that might require. The charity gala the following evening was a glittering affair at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Olivia wore midnight blue, her smile fixed as she moved through the crowd of New York's elite. Dominic worked the room with practiced charm, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back in a gesture that once brought comfort, but now felt like a brand. "You look distracted," came a voice at her elbow. Olivia turned to find Marcus Winters, Meridian's legal counsel and her oldest friend. "Just tired," she replied, sipping champagne she couldn't taste. Marcus studied her with knowing eyes. "Tired doesn't usually make you look like you're planning a jailbreak. What's going on, Liv?" Before she could answer, Dominic appeared, slipping his arm around her waist. "The Callaways want to discuss their foundation grant. Join me?" The evening blurred into a series of meaningless conversations, Olivia performing her role as the supportive wife and company executive. She watched Dominic charm potential investors, politicians, and celebrities with the same practiced ease. Had he always been this smooth, this calculated? Or had she simply never noticed the performance before? Across the room, she spotted Elijah in conversation with the daughter of a prominent judge. At 17, he looked startlingly like Dominic, at that age tall and lean, with the same confident posture, the same gesture of running a hand through dark hair when making an important point. "He's going to break some hearts at Stanford," remarked Josephine Calloway, following Olivia's gaze. "If he gets in," Olivia replied automatically. Josephine laughed. "With his credentials? With Dominic Reed as his father? Please, that boy's future is golden." Golden. The word echoed in Olivia's mind as she watched her son navigate the social complexities of the gala with the same ease his father demonstrated. Elijah's future should be golden, but now it balanced on a knife's edge, threatened by the very man who had shaped him. Only when they returned home, the penthouse quiet, and Elijah asleep, did she finally gather her courage. "I found the accounts," she said simply, standing in the doorway of Dominic's study. He looked up from his tablet, expression unreadable. "What accounts?" "Cayman Islands, Singapore, the shell corporations, all of it." Her voice remained steady, despite the earthquake in her chest. "How long, Dom? How long have you been stealing from our company?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with 2 decades of shared history and the weight of betrayal. "It's not stealing," he finally said, setting down his tablet. "It's strategic reallocation. The board doesn't understand what it takes to stay competitive in this market." "Don't." Olivia's voice hardened. "Don't insult me with corporate doublespeak. You've embezzled millions. You've committed fraud. You've risked everything we built. Everything that belongs to our son." Dominic stood, his imposing frame casting shadows across the room. "I did what was necessary. For us. For Elijah's future." "His future?" Incredulity sharpened her words. "You've put his inheritance at risk. Worse, you've risked his faith in you and everything you taught him about integrity and hard work." Something flickered across Dominic's face, perhaps the first genuine emotion she'd seen from him in months. "Elijah will never know. No one will. I've covered my tracks." "Not well enough for your own CFO to miss it," Olivia countered. "How long before the SEC notices? Before our auditors find discrepancies? Before someone else in the company stumbles across what I found?" Dominic moved toward her, reaching for her hands. She stepped back. "Liv, please. I can fix this. I just need time to move some assets, clean up the paper trail. 6 months, maybe a year. And continue defrauding our investors, our employees, the people who trust us. It's business," he said, his voice hardening. "Sometimes the lines blur." Olivia stared at the stranger before her. This man who shared her bed, her name, her life. "The lines don't blur, Dom. You cross them. Deliberately. Repeatedly." She turned to leave, but his next words froze her in place. "If you report this, you'll destroy Elijah. Think about what the media will do to him. The son of a disgraced CEO. Think about his college applications. His future. Is your moral high ground worth sacrificing our son's happiness?" The manipulation was obvious, but the threat to Elijah was real. Olivia left without another word, her mind racing through impossible choices. In their bedroom, she sat on the edge of their bed, staring at wedding photos on the wall, younger versions of themselves, eyes bright with promise and shared dreams. When had Dominic changed? Or had he always been capable of this, and she simply hadn't wanted to see it? Have you ever felt like you didn't really know someone you've loved for years? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes, the hardest truths come from those closest to us. Sleep eluded her. By morning, she had formulated a plan, one that would require courage, sacrifice, and perfect timing. For the next 2 weeks, Olivia maintained a careful facade. She attended meetings, signed reports, and played the role of devoted wife. Meanwhile, she meticulously gathered evidence, creating secure backups of every incriminating document. She consulted discreetly with a criminal attorney, establishing attorney-client privilege before revealing what she'd discovered. You have options, the attorney told her. As CFO, you have a legal obligation to report financial fraud, but as the whistleblower, you could negotiate immunity. And my husband? Best case? Significant fines, disgorgement of ill-gotten gains, and probation. Worst case? Federal prison. Olivia nodded, the reality settling like lead in her stomach. And if I wanted to protect my son from public scandal? The attorney's expression softened. That's considerably more complicated. Complicated, but not impossible. Olivia began laying groundwork for a controlled implosion rather than a public explosion. She approached Marcus Winters, securing his help in crafting a strategy that would allow for internal correction without criminal charges if Dominic cooperated. He won't, Marcus warned, as they spoke in hushed tones in a coffee shop far from their usual haunts. Dom doesn't admit defeat. He will for Elijah, Olivia replied, hoping she was right. Marcus stirred his coffee, considering. Even if he agrees, the board will need to know something. We can't just restate earnings without explanation. We tell them enough truth to satisfy legal requirements, but frame it as accounting irregularities discovered and self-reported. Dominic steps down for health reasons, makes restitution, and we avoid criminal charges. And you? Where do you fit in this plan? Olivia hadn't considered her own future. I don't know. I can't stay as CFO, not after this, but I can't leave the company vulnerable either. You could step in as interim CEO, Marcus suggested. The board trusts you. It would stabilize the company while we search for permanent leadership. The idea was startling but not unreasonable. Olivia had been with Meridian from day one. She understood every aspect of the business, had relationships with major clients and investors. Still, the prospect of taking Dominic's position, even temporarily, felt like another betrayal. Let's focus on containing the damage first, she said, one impossible task at a time. The most difficult part was maintaining normalcy with her son. Elijah, perceptive and intuitive, sensed the tension between his parents. Is everything okay? He asked one evening, looking up from his calculus homework. You and Dad barely talk anymore. Olivia sat beside him at the kitchen island. Your father and I are working through some business disagreements. Nothing for you to worry about. Elijah studied her with eyes so like his father's before greed had dimmed them. Is it about the foundation money? I overheard Dad talking about moving funds. Olivia's heart stuttered. What exactly did you hear? Elijah shrugged. Something about offshore transfers being untraceable. He was on the phone in his study. I wasn't eavesdropping. I swear I just needed to ask about college visits. She forced a smile, squeezing his hand. It's complicated financial stuff. Focus on your applications. Stanford's lucky to have you considering them. Later, alone in her home office, Olivia added this new information to her growing file. Elijah had inadvertently provided another piece of evidence and another reason to handle this situation delicately. The confrontation came sooner than she'd planned. 3 days later, Dominic stormed into her office at Meridian, closing the door with controlled force. You've been meeting with Marcus behind my back, he said, voice dangerously quiet. And you consulted an attorney specializing in white-collar crime. Olivia met his gaze steadily. I'm protecting our company. And our son. By betraying me? You betrayed us first, Dom. Every time you diverted funds. Every time you falsified reports. Every time you lied to the board to me. His expression hardened. Whatever you think you're doing, stop. Now, before you can't turn back. It's already too late for that, she replied. But it's not too late for you to mitigate the damage. She slid a folder across her desk. Inside was her proposal. Dominic would resign for health reasons, quietly return the misappropriated funds, and the board would be informed of accounting irregularities that required restatement of earnings but no criminal investigation. You expect me to walk away from my own company? Disbelief colored his voice. I expect you to protect your son from watching his father being led away in handcuffs, Olivia countered. I expect you to face consequences for your actions without destroying Elijah's world. Dominic's laugh was hollow. And who would run Meridian? You? Temporarily, until the board selects a permanent CEO. He studied her with new eyes, not as his wife, but as an opponent he'd underestimated. You've thought of everything. Not everything, she admitted. I haven't figured out how to explain to our son why his father betrayed everything he claimed to stand for. I haven't figured out how to rebuild his trust once he learns the truth. Because he will learn it, Dom. If not now, then someday. Something flickered in Dominic's eyes, perhaps the first genuine remorse she'd seen. He took the folder, his fingers brushing hers in a touch that once would have sparked electricity but now felt like a closing door. I need time to consider this. You have until tomorrow, Olivia said. After that, I go to the board with or without your cooperation. Dominic left without another word, the folder clutched in his hand. Olivia exhaled slowly, the confrontation leaving her drained yet strangely empowered. For the first time in weeks, she had taken action rather than simply reacting to her discovery. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elijah. Debate team won regionals. Dad's not answering his phone. Will you tell him? The simple message twisted in her heart. How many more moments of pride and joy would be shadowed by what was to come? That's wonderful, she texted back. So proud of you. I'll tell Dad when I see him. Celebration dinner tonight? The reply came instantly. Yes. Can we go to Marcello's? Marcello's, the Italian restaurant where they'd celebrated every Reed family milestone since Elijah was old enough to twirl pasta. The place where Dominic had taken them after Meridian went public, where they'd toasted Elijah's first debate victory, where they'd celebrated Olivia's promotion to CFO. Absolutely, she replied. 7:30? That night, Olivia returned to an empty penthouse. Elijah was at debate team celebrations with friends before their dinner, and Dominic had texted that he was working late. She moved through the silent rooms, touching photographs, remembering the life they'd built, wondering how much of it had been real. At Marcello's, Elijah regaled her with details of the debate competition, his face animated with excitement. The opposing team thought they had us with their economic impact argument, but I countered with ethical considerations that completely undermined their position, he explained, gesturing with breadsticks. Dad would have loved it, he always says. Ethics trumps profits in the long run. The irony wasn't lost on Olivia. He's right about that, she managed to say. Where is he anyway? Elijah asked, glancing at the empty third chair. Still? At the office? Important client meeting, Olivia lied, hating herself for it. He sends his congratulations and promises to hear all about it tomorrow. Elijah nodded, disappointment flickering across his features before he launched into another debate anecdote. Olivia listened, laughed at the right moments, asked appropriate questions, all while her mind raced with contingency plans and worst-case scenarios. Her phone rang just after midnight. Not Dominic, but Marcus. Dom called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning, he said without preamble. He's going to try to force you out before you can expose him. Olivia closed her eyes, disappointment but not surprise washing through her. Can he succeed? Not if you move first. I've prepared the documents. We can call our own meeting, present the evidence. And Elijah, how do I protect him when this becomes public? Marcus's voice softened. I don't know, Liv. Some damage can't be prevented, only managed. After hanging up, Olivia sat in darkness, weighing impossible choices. The sound of the front door opening roused her. Dominic's footsteps crossed the foyer, pausing when he saw her sitting in the dimly lit living room. You should be sleeping, he said, loosening his tie. So should you. Big day tomorrow trying to fire your wife before she can expose your crimes. If he was surprised by her knowledge, he didn't show it. It's not personal, Liv. It's business. It's our life, Dom. Our family. Our son's future. How is that not personal? He sat across from her, suddenly looking tired. What do you want from me? I want the man I married. The one who believed in building something meaningful, not just profitable. The one who wanted to make his son proud. Her voice caught. I want to know if he still exists. Dominic looked away, silence stretching between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, stripped of corporate polish, raw, with something like regret. It started small, a temporary transfer to cover a cash flow problem, then another. It was always meant to be temporary, but then the amounts grew, and the deception became necessary. He met her eyes. I told myself it was for us, for Elijah's future, but maybe it was just easier than admitting I'd made mistakes. And now? Now I don't see a way out that doesn't destroy everything, including Elijah's faith in me. Olivia leaned forward. There is a way. Not perfect, not painless, but better than the alternative. Take the deal I offered, resign, make restitution, rebuild. And us? What happens to our marriage? The question hung between them, weighted with 20 years of history, the good and the bad, the true and the false. I don't know, she answered honestly. That depends on whether the man I married still exists somewhere inside the person you've become. The hardest conversations are often the most necessary. Like this video, if you believe in facing difficult truths head on, even when they break your heart. Morning brought clarity and resolution. Dominic, after a night of soul-searching, agreed to Olivia's terms. Together, they crafted a statement announcing his resignation due to health concerns, with Olivia stepping in as interim CEO. Behind closed doors, the board was informed of the accounting irregularities and the plan for quiet restitution. The emergency meeting was tense but controlled. Board members asked pointed questions, expressed appropriate shock and concern, but ultimately accepted the proposed solution. The company's stock would take a hit when the restated earnings were released, but the damage would be contained. No criminal charges, no media scandal, no public humiliation. We need to tell Elijah tonight, Olivia said as they rode the elevator down from the boardroom, before he hears rumors. Dominic nodded, his face ashen. What do we say? How do we explain? We tell him the truth. As much as he can handle, but nothing less. He deserves that. The hardest conversation was with Elijah. They sat him down in their living room, the Manhattan skyline, a glittering backdrop to the unraveling of his world. I've made serious mistakes, Dominic told him, voice steady despite the cost. Financial decisions that crossed ethical and legal lines. I'm stepping down from Meridian to address these issues privately. Elijah looked between his parents, confusion giving way to understanding. The offshore accounts, the transfers I overheard. His voice hardened. You were stealing. Yes, Dominic admitted, the single word clearly costing him more than all the millions he'd taken. Why? Elijah demanded. We already had everything. What more did you need? It was the question Olivia had asked herself countless times. Dominic had no answer that could satisfy either of them. I lost perspective, he finally said. Success became a number, not a principle. I forgot what I wanted you to learn from me, integrity, not just achievement. Tears filled Elijah's eyes. So everything you taught me about honesty and hard work was a lie? No, Olivia interjected. The principles were real. Your father lost his way, but that doesn't erase the truth of what he taught you. Elijah stood, anger and hurt radiating from him. I need time to process this. He left the room, the soft click of his bedroom door, more devastating than any slam could have been. In the silence that followed, Dominic reached for Olivia's hand. She didn't pull away. Thank you, he said quietly, for finding a way to protect him, even when I couldn't. I did it for him, she replied. What happens next depends on you. The following days brought a flurry of activity. Meridian's PR team managed the announcement of Dominic's resignation with careful messaging about health concerns and the need for work-life balance. Financial analysts noted the timing coincided with the company's announcement of restated earnings due to accounting methodology revisions, but few made direct connections. Olivia stepped into the role of interim CEO with a calm authority that steadied nervous employees and reassured major clients. Behind the scenes, she worked with financial investigators to trace and recover the diverted funds, a process that would take months. At home, the atmosphere was fragile. Elijah retreated into himself, spending more time at school activities and friends' houses. When he was home, conversations were stilted, limited to practical matters and surface pleasantries. Dominic moved into the guest bedroom without discussion. He spent his days meeting with financial advisors, arranging for personal assets to be liquidated to make restitution. In the evenings, he made awkward attempts to connect with Elijah, offering help with college essays, suggesting they watch basketball games together, leaving articles about robotics competitions on his son's desk. Most of these overtures were rebuffed, but occasionally Elijah would engage briefly, allowing a glimpse of what might eventually be possible between them. 3 weeks after the resignation, Olivia found Elijah sitting on the terrace late one night, staring at the city lights. Can't sleep? She asked, joining him. He shook his head. I got an email from Stanford today. They want to schedule an alumni interview. That's good news, Olivia said carefully. Is it? Elijah turned to her, his young face troubled. Dad was going to be my alumni connection. Now what do I say? Sorry. My father resigned in disgrace, but I promise I'm nothing like him. Your father hasn't been publicly disgraced, Olivia reminded him, and your achievements stand on their own merits. But they'll ask about him. Everyone does. What's it like being Dominic Reed's son? It used to be the easiest question in the world. Olivia's heart ached for him. And now? Now I don't know who he is, or who I am, if I'm not the son of the brilliant, ethical entrepreneur I thought he was. You're still you, Elijah. The person who teaches coding to middle schoolers. The debater who argues for ethical business practices. The son who makes both your father and me proud every day. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Did you know, before you found the evidence, did you suspect anything? The question caught her off guard. No, she admitted. I believed in him completely. Maybe that was my failure, not seeing the changes happening right in front of me. Then how can I trust my judgment about anyone? If you couldn't see it in your own husband, how am I supposed to know who's genuine and who's just playing a role? It was a profound question from a 17-year-old, one that Olivia herself was still struggling to answer. I think, she said slowly, that we trust, but we also pay attention. We look for consistency between words and actions. And we remember that people are complex, capable of both tremendous good and terrible mistakes. Like Dad? Like all of us. Your father did wrong, Elijah. Seriously wrong. But that doesn't erase the good he's done, or the love he has for you. Elijah considered this, his expression thoughtful beyond his years. I have the interview next week. Do you think Dad would help me prepare, like we planned before? Olivia smiled, hope warming her chest. I think that would mean everything to him. The next morning, she relayed the conversation to Dominic, watching as emotion transformed his face. He still wants my help? Disbelief and gratitude mingled in his voice. He's finding his way through this, just like we all are, Olivia said. It's a small opening, Dom. Don't waste it. That evening, Dominic and Elijah sat at the dining room table, reviewing potential interview questions and practicing responses. Their interaction was tentative at first, but gradually warmed as they fell into familiar patterns of thought and expression. Olivia watched from the kitchen, seeing glimpses of the father-son relationship that had been so strong before the revelation. It wasn't healed far from it, but it wasn't destroyed beyond repair either. As weeks turned into months, a new normal slowly emerged. Dominic found purpose in consulting with startups focused on ethical business practices, sharing hard-earned wisdom about the pitfalls of prioritizing growth over integrity. Elijah received his acceptance to Stanford, a bittersweet triumph that he celebrated with both parents at Marcello's. Olivia led Meridian through the transition period, with steady competence, working with the board to identify a permanent CEO while implementing stronger financial oversight systems. The company's stock recovered as investor confidence returned, employees settled back into productive routines, and the media moved on to fresher scandals. Their marriage remained in limbo, not ended, but fundamentally altered. Dominic continued to sleep in the guest room, but they shared meals, attended Elijah's events together, and gradually began having conversations that went beyond practical matters to touch on feelings, regrets, and possibilities. 6 months after the revelation, Olivia sat in her office, soon to be occupied by Meridian's new CEO, when Dominic appeared in her doorway. He looked different, humbler, the corporate armor stripped away. The last restitution payment cleared today, he said. It's done. Olivia nodded. The board is satisfied. The company will recover. And us? Dominic asked, the question hanging between them like a fragile thread. Olivia set down her pen, studying the man before her. The past 6 months had stripped away his corporate veneer, revealing something more authentic beneath a man humbled by his mistakes, working to rebuild what truly mattered. That's a more complicated question, she replied. Trust isn't restored with financial transactions. I know. He stepped into the office, not presuming to sit. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did, why success became more important than integrity. And what have you learned? That I was terrified of returning to poverty, that each achievement only raised the bar for the next, that somewhere along the way, I started measuring my worth by numbers in an account. His voice softened. And that I nearly lost what actually gives my life meaning, you and Elijah. Olivia felt the familiar ache of possibility, not the blind hope of their early years, but something more tempered and realistic. Elijah asked if you would come to his debate tournament next weekend. Dominic's eyes brightened. He did? He's arguing ethics in business, ironically enough. I think he wants you there not as the perfect father you pretended to be, but as the flawed human you actually are. And you? Do you want me there? The question wasn't just about the debate tournament. It was about their future, about whether redemption was possible after such profound betrayal. I think, Olivia said carefully, that I'm ready to see who you become next. Not the CEO, not the fraud, but the man underneath all those identities. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening, a possibility that what had broken might heal into something different, but perhaps stronger for having been tested. As Dominic left her office, Olivia turned to the window, watching the city spread before her, a landscape of ambition, temptation, failure, and resilience. Their story wasn't over, merely entering a new chapter, one where success would be measured not by wealth or status, but by the harder metrics of honesty, accountability, and the courage to begin again. She thought of Elijah, how this crucible had forced him to develop his own moral compass rather than simply inheriting his parents' values. How adversity had revealed his strength and capacity for nuanced understanding. Perhaps that was the unexpected gift in all this pain, the chance for each of them to discover who they truly were when everything they thought they knew had been upended. The debate tournament was held in a prestigious private school on the Upper East Side. Olivia and Dominic sat side by side in the auditorium, not touching but present together as Elijah took the podium. His topic, ethical leadership in the age of shareholder primacy, couldn't have been more pointed if he'd chosen it specifically for his father. The prevailing business philosophy suggests that a company's primary obligation is to maximize shareholder value, Elijah began, his voice steady and confident. But this narrow focus creates a dangerous incentive structure that can lead to short-term thinking, ethical compromises, and ultimately, corporate failure. Dominic shifted in his seat, his discomfort palpable. Olivia resisted the urge to reach for his hand. True leadership, Elijah continued, requires balancing multiple stakeholder interests, employees, customers, communities, and yes, shareholders. It demands the courage to make difficult decisions that might not immediately reflect in quarterly earnings, but will build sustainable value over time. As Elijah methodically dismantled arguments for prioritizing profits over ethics, Olivia watched Dominic's face. Pride and pain mingled in his expression. Pride in his son's brilliance. Pain in recognizing how far he had strayed from these principles. When Elijah's team was declared the winner, they both rose to their feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. Afterward, in the reception area, Elijah approached them, flushed with victory but hesitant. "What did you think?" he asked, looking primarily at Dominic. "You were extraordinary," Dominic replied, emotion thickening his voice. "Your arguments were compelling, your rebuttals precise, but more importantly, you spoke with conviction about principles that matter." Something in Elijah's posture relaxed. "I meant what I said up there. I know you did. And you were right." Dominic swallowed hard. "I wish I had listened to a voice like yours a few years ago." The moment was interrupted by Elijah's debate coach calling him over for team photos. As he walked away, Dominic turned to Olivia. "He's going to be better than both of us," he said softly. "That's the goal, isn't it?" she replied. "For our children to learn from our mistakes as well as our successes." Later that evening, as they celebrated Elijah's victory with takeout from his favorite Thai restaurant, Olivia observed the tentative rapport rebuilding between father and son. The conversation flowed more naturally than it had in months, touching on debate strategy, college preparations, and Elijah's ideas for a new coding project. "I could help with that," Dominic offered when Elijah described a challenge with his algorithm. "If you want." "Oh?" Elijah hesitated only briefly. "Yeah, that would be good. Tomorrow maybe?" "Tomorrow," Dominic agreed, not quite hiding his relief and pleasure. After Elijah went to bed, Olivia and Dominic found themselves alone in the living room, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. "Thank you," Dominic said, breaking the comfortable silence, "for coming to the tournament, for giving me the chance to be there." "It wasn't my decision," Olivia replied. It was Elijah's. He's finding his way toward forgiveness. And you? Dominic asked, the question that had hovered between them for months. Are you finding your way there too? Olivia considered her answer carefully. I'm finding my way toward understanding. Forgiveness may come with time. I'd like to come home, he said quietly. The request hung in the air between them, weighted with all they had been through. I'm not ready for that, Olivia admitted. Not yet. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. I understand. I'll wait. For as long as it takes. As spring turned to summer, Elijah prepared for his departure to Stanford. The acceptance had been a moment of pure joy and a difficult year validation that his own merit stood independent of his father's reputation or mistakes. Olivia stepped down from her interim CEO position when Meridian hired Janet Chen, a respected industry veteran with a reputation for ethical leadership. The transition was smooth, with Olivia agreeing to remain on the board to provide continuity and institutional knowledge. Dominic continued his consulting work with startups, finding unexpected fulfillment in mentoring young entrepreneurs about sustainable business practices. He moved into an apartment nearby, close enough to remain present in Elijah's life, but giving Olivia the space she needed to process her own feelings about their marriage. They established a new rhythm: family dinners twice a week, shared responsibility for Elijah's college preparations, occasional social events attended together as parents rather than as a couple. It wasn't what any of them had envisioned a year earlier, but it contained moments of genuine connection and even happiness. One evening in late July, Olivia invited Dominic to the penthouse for dinner. Elijah was away at a pre-college program, leaving them truly alone together for the first time in months. I've been thinking about selling this place, she said as they sat on the terrace with glasses of wine. After Elijah leaves for Stanford, it feels too big, too empty, too full of memories. Dominic nodded, looking out at the skyline that had once represented everything they'd achieved together. Where would you go? I'm not sure. Somewhere smaller. Somewhere that feels like a fresh start. And us? He asked, the question that never quite left the space between them. Is there a fresh start possible there too? Olivia turned to face him fully. I've been seeing a therapist too, trying to understand my part in all this, not the fraud, but the distance that grew between us. How I missed the signs that you were changing, that our values were diverging. It wasn't your fault, Liv. No, the choices you made were yours alone. But relationships don't break in isolation. We both stopped really seeing each other, somewhere, along the way. Dominic was quiet for a moment. What did you learn? About yourself? That I was so focused on being the perfect partner, the perfect executive, the perfect mother, that I stopped being honest about what I was feeling. I saw problems, but didn't confront them. I sensed changes, but didn't question them. She took a sip of wine. I learned that love without honesty isn't really love at all. And now, can you be honest with me now? Olivia met his gaze steadily. I miss you. Not the man you became at the end, the one who could justify fraud and manipulation, but the man I built a life with, the one who valued integrity as much as success, the one who looked at me like I was his partner, not just his wife. I want to be that man again, Dominic said softly. I'm trying to be. I know. I see that. She reached across the table, taking his hand for the first time in months. I'm not ready to rebuild our marriage. Not yet. But I'm ready to explore the possibility that we might find our way back to each other. Slowly. Honestly. With no guarantees. One. Hope kindled in Dominic's eyes. That's more than I deserve. It's not about deserving, Olivia replied. It's about choosing, every day, who we want to be, what we want to build, whether we have the courage to try again, knowing we might fail. As the sun set over Manhattan, casting golden light across the terrace, they sat with hands linked, neither rushing to fill the silence. There were no promises made, no declarations of undying love. Just two people who had weathered a devastating storm, finding that perhaps not everything had been washed away. The day they drove Elijah to the airport for his flight to California was bittersweet. Their son was embarking on his future, carrying with him both the weight of what he'd learned about human fallibility and the strength he discovered in himself. Call when you land, Olivia said, hugging him tightly at the security checkpoint. And remember, we're just a flight away if you need anything. I know, Mom. Elijah smiled, the shadow that had dimmed his eyes for months finally lifting. I'll be fine. He turned to Dominic, hesitating only briefly before stepping into his father's embrace. I'm proud of you, Dominic said, voice rough with emotion. Not just for Stanford, but for who you are, for how you've handled everything this year. I learned from both of you, Elijah replied. The good and the bad, how to succeed and how to face failure, how to make amends when you've done wrong. As they watched him disappear into the security line, Dominic's hand found Olivia's, a gesture that had once been automatic but now felt significant. He's going to be okay, Dominic said. Better than okay, Olivia agreed. He's going to be extraordinary. They walked back to the car together, not discussing what came next, but both sensing that Elijah's departure marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Whatever the future held, reconciliation or separation, forgiveness or a new beginning, they would face it with clear eyes and honest hearts. The corruption had been uncovered, their son protected from public scandal, and now the harder work began. Rebuilding trust one day, one conversation, one truth at a time. This story shows that true redemption begins with accountability. Subscribe to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love for more powerful stories about integrity, family, and second chances. 1 year after Elijah left for Stanford, Olivia stood in the empty penthouse, surrounded by moving boxes. The space that had once showcased their success now echoed with memories, some painful, some precious. She ran her hand along the marble countertop where Elijah had studied for exams, glanced at the terrace where she and Dominic had begun their tentative journey back toward each other, and felt a surprising peace. The doorbell rang, interrupting her reverie. Dominic stood in the hallway, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, a far cry from the power suits that had once been his uniform. Ready? He asked, stepping inside to grab the last few boxes. I think so, Olivia replied, taking a final look around. It's strange, isn't it? Leaving the place where we thought we'd live forever. Not as strange as I expected, Dominic admitted. It stopped feeling like home a long time ago. They had sold the penthouse for a considerable sum. Despite the softening luxury market, the proceeds were split half to a trust for Elijah, half to fund their new beginnings. Olivia had purchased a brownstone in Brooklyn, reminiscent of their first apartment together, but with the comfort and space her success had earned. Dominic had invested in a modest condo nearby, close enough for convenience, but separate enough to respect the boundaries they were still navigating. As they rode the elevator down for the last time, Dominic asked, Have you heard from Elijah today? This morning. He's nervous about his presentation, but prepared. Said he'd call tonight with an update. Elijah was thriving at Stanford, his initial semester challenges giving way to academic success and new friendships. The scandal that had rocked his family had ultimately strengthened him, forcing him to define himself beyond his father's name or achievements. He mentioned he's considering a double major, Dominic said as they loaded the last boxes into his car. Computer science and ethics. Olivia smiled. Fitting, isn't it? Taking what happened and transforming it into something meaningful. The drive to Brooklyn was comfortable, their conversation flowing easily between practical matters and deeper reflections. The past year had been one of careful rebuilding, not just of trust, but of genuine friendship. Weekly dinners had evolved into regular walks in Central Park, occasional theater outings, and honest conversations about what had gone wrong and what might still go right. Janet called yesterday, Olivia mentioned as they neared her new home. Meridian stock hit a new high. The company's fully recovered from the restatement. Dominic nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than pained. She's done an excellent job, better than I would have, even without the fraud. That's generous of you to admit. Therapy has its uses, he said with a self-deprecating smile. Helps with the whole not being a narcissistic jerk thing. Olivia laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that had once been common between them, but had become precious in its rarity. You were never a narcissistic jerk, just a man who lost his way for a while. A long while, Dominic corrected, turning onto her street. But I'm finding my way back. The brownstone stood warm and welcoming, its brick facade and black shutters classic rather than ostentatious. They carried the boxes inside, placing them in the living room where built-in bookshelves waited to be filled with the novels and photographs Olivia had carefully curated over the years. "It suits you," Dominic said, looking around the space with appreciation. "Elegant, but comfortable. Beautiful, without showing off." "That might be the nicest compliment you've ever given me," Olivia replied, only half joking. "I should have given you more of them." His voice softened. "I should have seen you more clearly, all those years." The moment stretched between them, weighted with regret, but also possibility. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" Olivia asked. "I was going to order from that Thai place Elijah loves. We could call him together afterward." Dominic's smile reached his eyes, the real smile she had fallen in love with decades ago, not the practiced charm he had later perfected for board meetings and investor calls. "I'd like that very much." Dinner was served on moving boxes in the half-furnished dining room, eaten with plastic utensils because the real ones were still packed away. They talked about Elijah, about Olivia's new consulting business advising companies on ethical financial practices, about Dominic's work mentoring young entrepreneurs. "I had a meeting with an interesting startup last week," he said, reaching for another spring roll. 3 kids barely out of college with a brilliant idea for sustainable supply chain management. Reminds me of us, back in the beginning. Except for the sustainable part, Olivia noted. We were all about disruption and growth. "That's what I'm trying to teach them, that you can have both. Ethical practices and profitability aren't mutually exclusive." The professor emeritus of corporate fraud sharing wisdom on ethical business practices, Olivia mused. "There's a certain poetry to it." Dominic winced slightly. "When you put it that way, it sounds like a joke." "Not a joke," she corrected. "A redemption story. Those who've made the worst mistakes often have the most valuable lessons to teach." After dinner, they video called Elijah, who appeared on screen looking tired but triumphant. "The presentation went great," he announced. "Professor Winters said my analysis of ethical decision-making frameworks was the most comprehensive she's seen from a sophomore." "That's wonderful," Olivia beamed. "We're so proud of you." "Are you guys together?" Elijah asked, noticing the same background behind both his parents. "Your mother just moved into her new place," Dominic explained. "I was helping with the last boxes." "The brownstone? How is it?" "Perfect," Olivia said. "You'll see when you come home for summer break. Your room is already smaller than your old one, but with a better view." They chatted for a while longer, Elijah sharing stories about his roommate's disastrous attempt at cooking and his upcoming internship interview with a tech ethics nonprofit. When they ended the call, the brownstone felt suddenly quiet. "He seems happy," Dominic observed, helping Olivia clear away the takeout containers. "He is. Happier than I expected, given everything. Children are resilient. And he had you steady, principled, unwavering." Olivia shook her head. "He had both of us. Your mistakes didn't erase the good father you were for 17 years, or the father you've continued to be, even through all this." Dominic paused, emotion crossing his features. "Thank you for that. For allowing me to stay in his life. In yours. We're family," Olivia said simply. "That didn't change, even when everything else did." As Dominic prepared to leave, they stood in the doorway, the moment feeling significant in ways neither could fully articulate. "Dinner was nice," he said. "Maybe we could do it again sometime?" "I'd like that." Olivia hesitated, then added, "Actually, I have tickets to that jazz quartet at Lincoln Center next weekend, the one we used to love, before everything. Would you want to join me?" The invitation hung between them not just an evening out, but a step toward something more intentional than their careful friendship of the past year. "Like a date?" Dominic asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Like two people who once loved each other seeing if there's still music they both want to dance to," Olivia replied. His smile was answer enough. The jazz concert marked a subtle shift in their relationship. They began seeing each other regularly, dinners at new restaurants they wanted to try, walks through museum exhibits, weekend matinees of plays that interested them both. They were dating again, rediscovering each other without the pressure of shared finances or domestic responsibilities. "It's strange," Olivia told her therapist during a session that spring. "In some ways, I know him better now than I did after 20 years of marriage. We actually talk about feelings, fears, hopes, things we stopped sharing somewhere along the way." "And how does that feel?" Dr. Patel asked. Terrifying, exhilarating, like I'm getting to know someone familiar and completely new at the same time. Do you trust him? The question gave Olivia pause. I trust that he's doing the work to become a better man. I trust his love for Elijah. I trust his remorse. She considered further. I don't know if I'll ever again trust him the way I did before with blind faith. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe real trust should always include clear-eyed awareness. Dr. Patel nodded. I'm getting there, Olivia admitted. Some days I think I have. Other days the hurt feels fresh again. But those days are becoming less frequent. And what would complete forgiveness look like to you? Olivia thought about this. I think it would look like being able to remember our whole story, the beautiful beginning, the painful middle, and whatever comes next, without the pain overshadowing everything else. It would mean accepting that good people can make terrible choices, and terrible choices don't necessarily make someone a terrible person. That's profound, Dr. Patel observed. And what about your future? Do you see Dominic in it? I'm starting to, Olivia said softly, and that scares me more than anything. Summer brought Elijah home, his presence filling both Olivia's brownstone and Dominic's condo with energy and laughter. He split his time between them, bringing them together for family dinners, movie nights, and weekend excursions to the beach. You two seem different, he observed one evening as the three of them sat on Olivia's back patio, sharing a bottle of wine, one glass for Elijah, who was still underage but allowed the occasional drink at home. Different how? Dominic asked. I don't know. More like yourselves? Like you're not trying so hard to be what you think the other person wants. Olivia exchanged a glance with Dominic, surprised by their son's perception. That's insightful. Well, I am taking Psychology 101, Elijah joked. Then, more seriously, I just mean you seem happier, both of you, even though you're not together. We're finding our way, Dominic said carefully. One day at a time. Elijah nodded, swirling the wine in his glass. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. The fraud, the cover-up, all of it. Tension immediately filled the air. They had discussed the situation with Elijah many times, but always with a certain carefulness, aware of his still healing relationship with his father. What about it? Olivia asked gently. I used to think it was simple. Dad did something wrong. You caught him. He faced consequences. Black and white. Elijah looked at his father. But I've been taking this business ethics class, and we've been discussing moral gray areas, situational pressures, cognitive biases that lead good people to make unethical choices. Son, Dominic began, don't use academic theories to excuse what I did. It was wrong, full stop. I'm not excusing it, Elijah clarified. I'm trying to understand it. There's a difference. What are you trying to understand? Olivia asked. Elijah considered his words carefully. How someone with strong principles can end up violating them. How the line between right and wrong can blur so gradually, you don't realize you've crossed it until you're miles past it. He looked at his father. How you could teach me about integrity my whole life and still lose sight of your own. The question hung in the air, not accusatory, but genuinely seeking understanding. Dominic set down his wineglass, giving the moment the gravity it deserved. The simplest answer is also the hardest to admit, he said finally. I stopped seeing myself clearly. Success became an addiction. Each achievement requiring a bigger hit to feel the same rush. When legitimate success wasn't coming fast enough, I started cutting corners. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. But why? Elijah pressed. We already had more than enough. Because enough is subjective, and comparison is endless. There was always someone with more wealth, more recognition, more power. I told myself I deserved what they had, that I was smarter, worked harder. Dominic's voice grew quieter. Pride is insidious that way. It whispers that the rules that apply to others shouldn't apply to you. Olivia watched this exchange with a mixture of pain and pride, pain at revisiting the betrayal, pride in both her son's maturity and her ex-husband's honesty. The most dangerous moment, Dominic continued, was when I started believing my own justifications. When I convinced myself that what I was doing wasn't really wrong because my intentions were good, because I was providing for my family, because the company would benefit in the long run. The slippery slope, Elijah murmured. Exactly, and once you're sliding, it's much harder to stop than it would have been to simply not step onto the slope in the first place. Elijah absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. Thank you for being honest, for not sugarcoating it. You deserve the truth, always. Dominic hesitated, then added, and I want you to know that understanding why I made those choices doesn't mean I don't take full responsibility for them. The circumstances may explain, but they don't excuse. I know, Dad. Elijah smiled slightly. That's actually what I admire most about how you've handled everything since Mom found out. You didn't try to blame anyone else. You've owned it. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, but something had changed. A deeper level of healing had occurred, not just between father and son, but among all three of them. The past hadn't been erased, but it had been integrated into their shared story in a way that felt honest and whole. Later, after Elijah had gone to bed, Dominic and Olivia sat alone on the patio, the summer night warm around them. He's remarkable, Dominic said softly, wiser than I was at twice his age. He's had to grow up quickly this past year, Olivia replied. But I think it's made him stronger, more compassionate. That's your influence. And yours. The good parts, anyway. Dominic laughed quietly. I'll take that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The sounds of the city, a distant backdrop to their private moment. Liv, Dominic said finally, using the nickname he'd called her in their early years. I need to tell you something. Something in his tone made her heart quicken. What is it? I've been offered a position with the Ethics in Business Initiative at Columbia, teaching MBA students about corporate governance and ethical leadership. Dom, that's wonderful. Olivia's surprise was genuine. When did this happen? They approached me last month. I've been considering it, talking with them about the curriculum. It would start in the fall semester. And you're going to accept? He nodded. I think so. It feels right using my mistakes to help others avoid the same pitfalls. The professor emeritus of corporate fraud, Olivia echoed her earlier joke, but with warmth rather than irony. Something like that. Dominic hesitated. There's more. The position would require me to be more public about what happened at Meridian. Not the legal details, those remained confidential under our agreement with the board, but I would need to speak openly about my ethical failures, the rationalizations I used, the consequences of my actions. Olivia understood immediately. You're worried about how that might affect Elijah and me. Yes, I won't take it if either of you objects. Your privacy, your well-being, those come first. The old Dominic would have made this decision unilaterally, perhaps informing them after the fact. This Dominic, the one who had been humbled by his mistakes and transformed by genuine remorse, was placing their needs above his own ambition. I think you should do it, Olivia said after a moment's reflection. Elijah has made his peace with what happened. He's secure in his own identity now. And she smiled slightly. I find I'm rather proud of the man you're becoming. Dominic's expression softened. That means more than you know. As he prepared to leave, they stood at the door, the moment reminiscent of so many goodbyes over the past year. Friendly, warm, but carefully maintaining the boundaries they had established. Dinner tomorrow? He asked. I thought we could try that new Mediterranean place in the village. Actually, Olivia said, surprising herself with her next words, why don't you come here instead? I'll cook. Dominic raised an eyebrow. You'll cook? Should I be concerned? Very funny. I've been taking classes, you know. I can make more than just reservations now. I'd love that, he said simply. As he turned to leave, Olivia made another impulsive decision. She reached for his hand, stopping him. When he looked back, question in his eyes, she leaned forward and kissed him not passionately, but with deliberate tenderness. What was that for? He asked when they separated, surprise evident in his voice. For becoming someone I can be proud of again, she replied. Good night, Dom. The dinner she prepared the following evening wasn't perfect. The salmon slightly overcooked, the asparagus a bit too crisp, but it was made with care and intention. They ate at her properly set dining table, candles lit, wine poured into the crystal glasses that had been wedding gifts 2 decades earlier. To new beginnings, Dominic toasted, raising his glass. And hard-earned wisdom, Olivia added. The conversation flowed easily between them, touching on Elijah's summer plans, Dominic's upcoming teaching position, Olivia's consulting work. It felt both familiar and new, the comfort of long acquaintance, blended with the excitement of rediscovery. After dinner, they moved to the living room, sitting closer on the sofa than their usual careful distance. "I've been thinking," Olivia said, setting down her wine glass. "About us, about what happens next." Dominic turned toward her, his expression open but guarded. "And what have you been thinking?" "That I miss you, not just as my friend, not just as Elijah's father, as my partner, the person who knows me better than anyone else in the world." Hope flickered in his eyes, but he didn't rush to fill the silence, giving her space to continue. "I know we can't go back to what we were," she continued. "Too much has happened. We're different people now. But maybe," she took a deep breath, "maybe we could build something new, something better even." "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Dominic asked carefully. "I'm saying I'd like to try again. Not living together, not right away, but being together, intentionally, exclusively." Dominic reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "I've wanted to ask you the same thing for months, but I was afraid it was too soon. That you might not ever be able to trust me that way again." "Trust is a choice," Olivia said. "A daily choice. And I'm choosing to trust the man you are now, the one who's done the hard work of facing his mistakes and changing his priorities. I won't let you down again," he promised, his voice rough with emotion. "Not ever." "Don't make promises you can't keep," she replied, but her tone was gentle. "Just promise to be honest with me, and with yourself. That's all I need." When he kissed her this time, it wasn't tentative or careful. It was a kiss that acknowledged their history, the joy and the pain, the betrayal and the forgiveness, while opening the door to their future. Elijah's reaction to their reconciliation was a mixture of cautious optimism and protective concern. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" he asked when Olivia told him over breakfast the next morning. "I mean, I'm happy for you both, but you're worried he'll hurt me again," she finished for him. Elijah nodded. "I've forgiven him. I love him. But what he did, it was a massive betrayal of trust." "It was," Olivia agreed. "And I'm not going into this with blinders on. We're taking it slowly, building something new rather than trying to resurrect what we had before. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll have tried our best. And we'll find a way forward that works for all of us. Your father and I will always be your parents, regardless of our relationship status." Elijah considered this, then smiled slightly. "You know, most kids would be thrilled their parents are getting back together." "You're not most kids," Olivia replied, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "You've seen too much, grown too wise. Your caution comes from love." "It does," he admitted, "for both of you." When Dominic came over that evening, Elijah greeted him with a hug that conveyed both acceptance and warning. "Mom told me about you too," he said directly. "And how do you feel about it?" Dominic asked, respecting his son's right to an opinion on the matter. "Cautiously optimistic," Elijah replied with a small smile. "But if you hurt her again—" "I know," Dominic interrupted. "I deserve whatever came my way. Actually, I was going to say that if you hurt her again, you'd be hurting yourself just as much. I've seen how miserable you were without her, how much happier you are now. That she's back in your life." Dominic's expression softened. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the time I had to reconcile the father I thought I knew with the one who made some pretty serious mistakes," Elijah replied, but without bitterness. "It turns out seeing your parents as real, flawed humans gives you a certain perspective." The summer passed in a golden haze of family dinners, weekend trips to the beach, and quiet evenings where Dominic and Olivia rediscovered each other as partners rather than just co-parents. They moved slowly, deliberately, building a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than the unexamined assumptions of their first marriage. When Elijah returned to Stanford for his junior year, they drove him to the airport together, a united front once more. "Call when you land," Olivia said, embracing him tightly. "And remember, we're proud of you no matter what," Dominic added. "Grades, internships, they matter, but they're not what define you." Elijah smiled at the irony of his achievement-oriented father now emphasizing character over accomplishments. "I know, Dad. I've learned that lesson pretty thoroughly." As they watched him disappear through security, Dominic slipped his arm around Olivia's waist. "He's going to change the world someday." "He already has," she replied. "Our world, at least." That fall brought new rhythms to their lives. Dominic began teaching at Columbia, his course on ethical leadership quickly becoming one of the most sought after in the MBA program. Students were drawn to his candor about his own failures and his practical insights into the pressures that could lead good people to make disastrous choices. "It's not about being perfect," he told his students during his first lecture. "It's about recognizing your vulnerabilities, establishing guardrails before you need them, and creating accountability systems that keep you honest even when no one is watching." Olivia's consulting practice flourished as companies increasingly recognized the value of ethical financial practices. She specialized in helping businesses establish transparent reporting systems and governance structures that made fraud more difficult to commit and easier to detect. They maintained separate residences but spent most nights together, alternating between his condo and her brownstone. The arrangement gave them both independence and togetherness, a balance that felt right for this new chapter of their relationship. One evening in late October, as autumn painted Central Park in brilliant reds and golds, Dominic suggested a walk after dinner. "For old time's sake," he said, referencing their early dating years when they'd been too poor for fancy restaurants but had found romance in long walks through the city. The evening was crisp but not cold, perfect for strolling hand in hand along familiar paths. They talked about Elijah's latest research project, Dominic's students, Olivia's newest client, the comfortable conversation of two people who shared a life but still found each other interesting. When they reached Bow Bridge, Dominic stopped, turning to face her. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" he asked. Olivia smiled at the memory. "Our 6-month anniversary. You brought a bottle of cheap champagne and plastic cups, and told you I was going to build a company that would change the world," he added. "I was so full of ambition and certainty." "We both were. Young and unstoppable." Dominic took both her hands in his. "I've been thinking about that night a lot lately. About the promises I made to you, to myself. Some I kept, others I broke spectacularly. Dom, please, let me finish." His expression was serious but tender. "I've spent the past 2 years rebuilding myself from the ground up, facing my worst mistakes, learning who I am without the trappings of success or the burden of secrets." Olivia felt her heart quicken, sensing the significance of the moment. "What I've discovered," he continued, "is that the best version of myself has always been the one reflected in your eyes, even when I couldn't see it clearly myself." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box, not velvet like a typical ring box, but worn leather that she recognized immediately. It had held her grandmother's earrings, passed down when they married, pawned during their lean early years to make rent, and repurchased by Dominic when Meridian secured its first major contract. "This isn't a new ring," he said, opening the box to reveal her original wedding band, a simple gold circle they'd chosen when diamonds were beyond their means. "I'm not asking you to go back to what we were, but I am asking if you'll marry me again, the man I am now, not the man I was then. If you'll build a new life with me, eyes wide open, knowing all my flaws and failures." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she looked at the ring that had symbolized their first commitment to each other, before wealth and success, before betrayal and redemption. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "After everything we've been through?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Dominic replied. "These past 2 years have taught me what matters, and what matters most to me is you, us, the family we've built and protected through the worst storm of our lives." Olivia took a deep breath, her decision already made in her heart. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you again." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, just as it had been 22 years earlier, Olivia felt not the blind optimism of youth, but the hard-won hope of experience. They had seen the worst of each other and chosen to love anyway. They had broken and mended, fallen and risen, lost and found their way back. "Should we call Elijah?" Dominic asked, as they continued their walk, her hand now adorned with the symbol of their renewed commitment. "Let's wait until morning," Olivia suggested. "It's late in California." But when they returned to her brownstone, Her phone was already ringing, Elijah's name lighting up the screen. "Mom," he exclaimed when she answered. "I just got the most cryptic text from Dad. All it said was, 'She said yes.' Please tell me that means what I think it means." Olivia laughed, looking at Dominic with mock accusation. "Your father apparently couldn't wait to share the news." "So it's true? You're getting married again?" "We are," she confirmed. "How do you feel about that?" There was a pause, then Elijah's voice, warm with emotion. "I feel like sometimes the hardest journeys lead exactly where you're supposed to be." They planned a small ceremony for the following spring, not a recreation of their first wedding, but a new beginning that honored their shared history while acknowledging how much had changed. Elijah would be home from Stanford to serve as best man. Marcus Winters, who had helped them navigate the darkest days of the scandal, would officiate. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with quiet joy and practical preparations. They decided to sell both their separate homes and purchase a new one, together a fresh start in a place that belonged to both of them equally. "No penthouse this time," Dominic said as they toured properties. "Something with character, history, substance." They found it in a renovated carriage house in Greenwich Village, smaller than their previous homes, but warm and inviting, with exposed brick walls, wooden beams, and a private courtyard garden. "It feels right," Olivia said as they stood in what would become their living room, "like it's been waiting for us." The week before the wedding, Elijah came home for spring break, bringing with him the energy and perspective that had always been his gift to them. "So," he said over dinner their first night together, "second time's the charm?" "Something like that," Dominic replied with a smile. "Though I'd say we're wiser this time, not luckier." "Definitely wiser," Olivia agreed. "We know what we're getting into now." Elijah studied them both, his expression thoughtful. "You know what's strange? A part of me is actually grateful for what happened 2 years ago." "Grateful?" Dominic repeated, surprised. "Not for the fraud itself," Elijah clarified, "but for what came after. The honesty, the growth, watching you both figure out what really matters." He smiled slightly. "I think I learned more from how you handled the worst crisis of your lives than I would have from decades of smooth sailing." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "That might be the most generous perspective I've ever heard." "Well, I've had good teachers," Elijah replied. "Both of you, in different ways." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect April morning. They gathered in the garden of their new home, just family and closest friends. No media, no spectacle. Olivia wore a simple blue dress rather than traditional white. Dominic a suit without tie. Elijah stood proudly between them, holding both rings until the moment of exchange. Marcus spoke briefly about second chances and hard-earned wisdom before inviting them to share their vows, new promises crafted from the lessons of their journey. "Olivia," Dominic began, his voice steady with conviction, "I promise to see you clearly, to listen deeply, and to speak truthfully even when truth is difficult. I promise to value integrity above success, honesty above comfort, and our partnership above my pride. I promise to remember, every day, that love is not just a feeling, but a choice, and I choose you, now and always." Olivia took a breath, emotion making her voice tremble slightly. "Dominic, I promise to walk beside you with open eyes and an open heart. I promise to offer forgiveness when it's needed and accountability when it matters. I promise to remember that we are both imperfect, both capable of growth, both worthy of grace. I promise to choose trust day by day, knowing that what we've rebuilt is stronger for having been broken and mended." As they exchanged rings, his new, hers, the original band that had returned to her finger months earlier, Olivia felt a sense of completion. Not the end of their story, but the beginning of its most authentic chapter. The reception was simple but joyful, good food, better wine, and the warm embrace of those who had supported them through their darkest days. As evening fell, lights twinkled in the garden trees, and Dominic led Olivia in their first dance as husband and wife again. "Happy?" he asked softly, as they moved together to the music. "Beyond words," she replied. "You? More than I deserve." She shook her head slightly. "No more of that. We've both earned this happiness, the hard way." Later, as guests began to depart, Elijah approached them, champagne glass in hand. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, his voice carrying across the small gathering. "To my parents, who taught me that integrity means doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. That redemption is possible for those willing to face their mistakes honestly. That love, real love, can survive even the most profound betrayal when it's rooted in truth. He raised his glass higher, to second chances, hard-earned wisdom, and the courage to begin again. As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed around them, Dominic slipped his arm around Olivia's waist, drawing her close. "We did it," he murmured against her hair. "Protected Elijah, saved the company, found our way back to each other." "We did," she agreed, though not in the order or the way I would have expected. "Life rarely follows the plan," Dominic observed. "Sometimes it takes a catastrophe to show us what truly matters." As the last guest departed and Elijah retired to his room, Dominic and Olivia stood in their garden, the city lights twinkling beyond the walls like distant stars. "No regrets?" he asked, searching her face in the gentle illumination. "About marrying you again?" "None." She smiled, touching his cheek. "About the journey that brought us here?" "Also, none. Every step, even the painful ones, led us to this moment." Dominic drew her into his arms, his embrace both familiar and new. "Then here's to the journey," he said softly. "Past, present, and future." As they stood together in the garden of their new home, Olivia reflected on the path that had brought them to this moment. From ambitious young entrepreneurs to successful executives, from betrayal and heartbreak to redemption and renewal, they had weathered the worst storm of their lives and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, more authentic. The corruption had been uncovered, their son protected from public scandal, and in the process, they had discovered truths about themselves and each other that might otherwise have remained hidden beneath the glossy surface of success. 2 years after that fateful night when Olivia had confronted Dominic with evidence of his fraud, they had rebuilt not just their relationship but their very identities. No longer defined by wealth or status, they had found meaning in integrity, purpose in helping others avoid similar pitfalls, and joy in the simple truth of being fully known and loved anyway. As they walked hand in hand into their home, their new beginning, Olivia knew that their story wasn't perfect. There would still be difficult days, moments of doubt, echoes of old wounds, but they would face them together, eyes open, hearts honest, choosing each other anew each day. 5 years later, Olivia stood in the audience at Stanford's graduation ceremony, watching with pride as Elijah received his dual degrees in computer science and ethics. Beside her, Dominic squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with emotion. "He did it," he whispered, "everything we hoped for him." "And more," Olivia replied. "So much more." Elijah had thrived at Stanford, his academic achievements matched by his growth as a leader and advocate. He had founded an ethics and technology initiative that paired engineering students with philosophy majors to explore the moral implications of emerging technologies. His senior thesis on ethical frameworks for artificial intelligence had already been accepted for publication in a prestigious journal. But more important than his accomplishments was the man he had become: thoughtful, principled, compassionate. The crisis that might have destroyed him had instead forged his character in ways neither Olivia nor Dominic could have predicted. After the ceremony, they found him amid the crowd of graduates, his face alight with triumph and possibility. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Olivia said, embracing him tightly. "We are so incredibly proud of you." "Thanks, Mom." Elijah turned to Dominic, who seemed momentarily overcome with emotion. "Dad, you okay?" Dominic nodded, pulling his son into a fierce hug. "More than okay, just grateful. For who you are, for the man you've become." Elijah returned the embrace, understanding the deeper meaning behind his father's words. "I had good examples, both what to do and what not to do." The three of them laughed together, the joke possible only because of the healing that had occurred over the years. "So," Olivia said as they walked toward the reception, "have you decided which offer you're going to accept?" Elijah had received multiple job offers, tech giants eager to hire him for their ethics divisions, startups promising equity and influence, even a prestigious fellowship at an ethics research center. "Actually," he replied, "I've been thinking about something different, something new." "New how?" Dominic asked. "I want to start my own company. An ethics consultancy for tech firms, helping them build ethical considerations into their products from the ground up, not as an afterthought. Olivia and Dominic exchanged glances, recognizing the entrepreneurial spirit that had driven their own early careers. "That sounds amazing," Olivia said, "but also challenging. The market for that kind of service is still developing." "I know. That's why it matters." Elijah's expression grew serious. "Look, I've seen firsthand what happens when success becomes more important than principles. I want to help create a business culture where that false choice doesn't exist, where ethical practice is recognized as essential to long-term success, not an obstacle to it." Dominic nodded slowly. "You're talking about changing the paradigm, not just building a company, but transforming how business itself is conducted." "Exactly." Elijah's eyes lit with the same passion they had once seen in each other, decades earlier. "And I think I'm uniquely positioned to do it. Because of my education, yes, but also because of our family story. I understand the pressures, the rationalizations, the slippery slope, and the consequences." "You'd use our experience as a case study?" Olivia asked, surprised. "With your permission, yes. Not the legal details, but the human story. How good intentions can go astray. How redemption is possible. How families can heal, even after profound betrayal." Dominic was quiet for a moment, considering. "It would mean making our private journey even more public than it already is." "I know," Elijah acknowledged. "And if you're not comfortable with that, I'll find another approach. But I think there's power in authenticity in showing that ethical failures aren't just abstract case studies, but real human stories, with real consequences." Olivia looked at her husband, seeing in his expression the same mixture of apprehension and pride she felt herself. Their story, painful, messy, ultimately redemptive, could serve a purpose beyond their own healing. "I think," she said carefully, "that if sharing our experience helps others avoid similar mistakes, then the vulnerability would be worth it." Dominic nodded in agreement. "Your mother's right. Use our story if you think it will help. Just what, Dad?" "Just make sure you tell all of it. Not just the fall, but the recovery. Not just the betrayal, but the forgiveness. The whole journey." Elijah smiled, relief and gratitude evident in his expression. "I will, I promise." That evening, they celebrated at a restaurant near campus, joined by Elijah's closest friends and his girlfriend, Maya, a brilliant law student he'd met during a cross-disciplinary seminar on technology regulation. As Olivia watched her son, confident, purposeful, surrounded by people who shared his values and vision, she felt a profound sense of peace. The worst crisis of their family life had ultimately led to its greatest strength. Under the table, Dominic's hand found hers, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had traveled together. From ambitious young entrepreneurs to wealthy but compromised executives. From the brink of destruction to this moment of quiet triumph, not in financial success or social status, but in the character of their son and the integrity of their rebuilt life together. Later that night, in the hotel suite they'd booked for graduation weekend, Olivia and Dominic stood on the balcony, looking out at the Stanford campus glowing softly in the distance. "Did you ever imagine, that night when you found the evidence, that we'd end up here?" Dominic asked, his arm around her shoulders. Olivia shook her head. "Never. I thought our family was over, that everything we'd built was about to crumble." "It did crumble, in a way," he reflected. "But we built something better from the ruins." "Something real," she agreed. "Not perfect, but honest." They were silent for a moment, contemplating the journey that had brought them to this peaceful night. "You know what I'm most grateful for?" Dominic said finally. "What's that?" "That you loved our son enough to find a way through the mess I created. That you protected him while still insisting on truth and accountability. That you were strong enough to hold all those competing priorities at once." Olivia turned in his arms, looking up at the face she had loved for half her lifetime, a face now lined with experience, humbled by failure, dignified by genuine redemption. "And you know what I'm most grateful for?" she asked. "Tell me." "That beneath the ambition and the mistakes and the fear, you were still the man I married. That when faced with the consequences of your actions, you chose our son over your pride. You chose truth, eventually, over deception." Dominic kissed her gently, the gesture conveying decades of shared history, The joy and the pain, the betrayal and the forgiveness, the breaking and the healing. "We got our second chance," he murmured against her hair. "Not everyone does." "We earned it," Olivia corrected him. "Both of us, in different ways, and that's what makes it precious." As they returned inside, Olivia thought about the young woman she had been: ambitious, principled, certain of her path, and the journey that had led her here. She had uncovered corruption in the heart of her own marriage, protected her son from public scandal, and in the process discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. The path had not been easy. There had been moments of devastating pain, impossible choices, uncertain outcomes. But standing here now, with her family intact though transformed, with integrity restored though tested, with love deepened through adversity rather than diminished by it, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The hardest road had led to the most meaningful destination. This story shows that true redemption begins with accountability. Subscribe to Mr. Sterling's Secrets of Love for more powerful stories about integrity, family, and second chances. If you've been moved by Olivia and Dominic's journey, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the greatest strength is found not in avoiding mistakes, but in how we respond when we make them.